Welcome to Mindful AI, the podcast where we explore how to create AI that is beneficial to humanity, ethical, and promotes human values and flourishing. Today, we're joined by Dr. Kim Oosthuizen, Head of AI at SAP Australia and New Zealand. With a PhD in AI integration and over 20 years of experience, Kim has transformed operations and technology through innovative AI strategies that enhance business processes and user satisfaction. She's the founder of the SAP AI Partner Council in Australia and a passionate advocate for diversity in tech. In this episode, we explore the benefits of AI in daily life, how it enhances soft skills and leadership, and its ethical challenges. Join us for a fascinating look at how AI can be used to supercharge businesses in ethical and empowering ways. If you find this episode insightful, please subscribe to Mindful AI and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us bring more of these important and meaningful conversations to you and others.
Welcome, Kim. Thanks so much for accepting to have a conversation on this episode 2 of the Mindful AI podcast. Such an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Martin. Nice to see
Thank
you.
you. We are very spoiled to have the head of AI at SAP in our second episode. How lucky. So, Kim, let's start with a broad, open question. Let's look into the potential benefits of AI. We know that there are many exciting things about AI, and maybe a couple of concerns out there. But let's start with the benefits and the good things about AI in your perspective, please.
Yes. So AI has got significant benefits for everyone to use, and it's really a tool that is for everyone now. It's not only for the few. And when we look at Australia at the moment, we've got the lowest level of productivity. So we can look at technology as AI to help us with that. So some benefits that AI can offer us is there's so many opportunities in every single sector if we just look at that. But it can really help us to augment human capabilities. So what I mean by that is if there's anything that can help us when we need to write something or summarize documentation, or when we just have a writer's block, it's really coming in there and helping us with that augmenting human capability. And another area where that's helping us is if we're working in customer service and we have to look at all this data and really come up with how to serve our customers. It's really augmenting that call center staff from that perspective. Then it automates repetitive tasks. I don't think any of us likes doing boring, mundane work and doing the same thing. I don't like myself typing documents from one place to another where it can just be automated. So really AI, and this is where we enhance productivity the most, is taking these manual workloads that we have, specifically in businesses, even in the finance space. We still do a lot of work, and it's taking that work away from our employees, but automating and doing that work for you. So an example would be similar to typing the document and information multiple times. You can automate that functionality with AI that's existed for a really long time, and it removes the errors for you. So that's really where a key benefit is in business. And then one that that's been around for a long time was on the predictions and looking at your data site and making sense of your data. But when we look at that, now AI is really helping us make better decisions on our data and what we can do and how and where we need to invest into the future by mining and processing all that documentation. Something that's quite challenging for us humans to do is look at all these multiple data sets, and then it will help us provide answers on the data and also give us guidance of how we can predict into the future. So that's really where most of AI has been used in the past. And then something that's coming in now is just automating some processes, so benefits, just removing that workaround. I always say there's no standard processes, so I can remove that workarounds. So it just frees up our resources, and we can do more higher value added work than doing all this boring work going forward. So that's where it really helps us. But we can only get benefits when we address some challenges.
Yeah, and just curious. I was just about to ask you about some of the risk, but I was also curious if do you see a role for AI in some of the, if you want to call it, softer skills? Like, can we manage employees in a more unbiased and a better? Can AI help us perform better in those kind of more human soft skills as well, or is it just tasks? What do you say?
Yes. No, so well, if you look at the how does it augment what we do, the really important task and how the newer generative AI technologies are, it's sort of augmentation to what I do, and it can really help you co-create and co-create knowledge with your own knowledge, and that's really where it's a really really nice tool to use. Let's say if I'm a coder today, so and you needed to create an algorithm or check your code in the system, it would have taken you looking at forums for a couple of hours trying to find out where my error is. And these tools are really helping even the coders' productivity to find those tasks, so helping them figure it out. But it's not doing it for them, it's sort of helping
Mm.
them. Then, when we look at the writing tool, so when you have particular knowledge in one area, and you're now going to use these tools, like let's use generative AI as example, and you have knowledge in that domain, that's really where it's very powerful because you understand the output. It can help you write. It can also help you find opportunities of where you can then use it if you understand the domain specifically. So you did mention the buyer side and also that side. But one important thing is always we always need to ensure that we validate and check the data because AI is only as good
Mm.
the data it is trained on. Um, and we've got some challenges there, and I'll go a little bit into the representation of AI and the who's developing these tools. So if I look at globally, we've got 50% of the global population is females. However, only 22% of the AI jobs, we've got women that's working in these. And that's also, it gets even worse when we look at diverse perspectives, when we drill that down. Another challenge is bringing in uh, training and literacy. So we only in Australia have about 7% of women in the workforce that's been trained on AI specific skills versus 16% men. So there's really that lack, and we really need that to build more AI for everyone. It's very important to ensure that we have that gender diversity and all the perspectives because these tools aren't are built by the few, and it's really narrow, and it can really amplify the biases and all the worldviews we've got within the applications, and it could skew it to a specific population, and that's really something we don't want. And I do believe AI has got an opportunity for every single person. However, we need more people to be interested in AI um, to help solve that challenge.
Excellent.
Yeah, and do you so those are I was just thinking we've all seen like the the Terminator movies with the robots that take over, and so those are some mild risks that you're touching on in comparison to scenarios that people are coming up with how AI is going to end this all basically. But what are some more, what do you see as like realistic risks?
Well, I'm going to go back to the gender and diversity because if it's created by a certain type of person, they don't see our worldviews. And it will continuously be a very narrowed view of the capability, and it will only serve a very small percentage of the population. And that's where it starts because when our data isn't complete and it doesn't represent who we are and what we are as a society, then I just can't even think about what the consequences would be because it's just proven that diverse perspectives in business, in at board levels, really creates innovation. It creates new thinking, and it also creates improved revenue. So why wouldn't you do it? And we all need to start looking at these tools in order to understand how they work. So for me, more the risk on the trust side is, and you said Terminator, and there's a lot of people that still think it's Terminator. Movies don't help, unfortunately. And what's happening is there's a big education gap and illiteracy actually about what AI is. And because if we think it's Terminator, we're gonna be scared to use it. We're gonna not trust it, and we just gonna have this mental block to using the technology. Instead of looking at it, do you realize that we're using AI today? It's in everything we do. We just don't know we're using it. When I go to, if when I came to the office today, I used Google Maps, and that's got AI in it. Even my personalized recommendation of what I want to watch, that's got AI in it, and even when I shop my product. We don't think of that as AI, but that's actually AI. And what is happening is everyone has opinions about AI. We're so scared of it, but many of us aren't using the tools that's available to us today. There's still some uptake, that's quite low. We're not using these Gen AI tools. So, but we have an opinion that we shouldn't trust it because it's gonna do something. But it's really important that we start using these tools, so we can truly understand what we can use it for, what's it really good to use. It can do these 5 things really well, but it can do these other things really poorly. So don't use that, and don't use it for that. And that comes then down to how we determine where we use it mindfully and what are these correct use cases we even bring into business and in our own lives. Because that's really where the power of AI will be, is when we all use it and when we actually understand what it can and can't do.
Wow. Thanks, Kim. So many things that you mentioned that I want to briefly comment, if that's okay. So I guess back to a previous question from Martin around AI can help us with process tasks, and how about the soft side? So what came to my mind was, I think it was a LinkedIn post I saw from you talking about HR, application of AI in HR. And I think I tagged Rasmus, who was our previous guest, who was here in the Mindful AI podcast, episode 1, and he was talking about how AI can be leveraged to improve leaders actually to lead better. So that was another use, according to his perspective. And I couldn't agree more with your point about the data quality. With my background in data analytics, is the classic rubbish in, rubbish out. We need to look at the quality of the data, and AI output will really be based on the quality of the data. So yeah, absolutely agree with that. And in terms of unintended consequences and concerns, I love your point of make use of the tools, to demystify and learn instead of, having concerns without really understanding. I really love that as well. And education gap. I think there was a podcast, not I think, there is a podcast that you did, the best run. By the way, I need to do a bit of a disclaimer here for those listening, because in my whole career I was working with SAP, assigned with SAP. So my view is potentially biased myself, because I love the brand, and was really, part of my first career. But the best run podcast that you were interviewed, um, one of the speakers was talking about the 3 types of intelligence, the analytical, cognitive, and creative, and how Gen AI is really addressing that creative intelligence. That even for me was like, wow, that's such a great way to put it, very simple words. So yeah, I agree with you. The education gap is huge, and even defining what's AI, as you said, we are using AI already. Google is AI basically. So yeah. So okay, enough rambling. What I wanted to ask you next is, you mentioned bias, not bias, the gender diversity, how gender diversity is important. And one belief that I personally have, and I'm happy to be wrong, is that the role that AI professionals play is very important in the absence of governance frameworks, in the absence of legislation. As we know, the legislation is running a little behind, I guess, probably more in Australia than in other countries. But I believe that those machine learning experts, data scientists who are day to day making decisions in their level, they also have a lot of responsibility to make safe AI. So that's my take, but I'm curious about your view on that statement. If you agree, disagree, partially. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, from my perspective, responsible AI is every single person's responsibility. We can't only leave that to AI professionals because they work with business users. Well, I'd hope they work with business users, and they actually need to determine if they have the correct data, is it suitable. Then when they are doing the testing and understanding what it's doing, is you have to work with a group of people to determine if that's overall the correct output. And that would be really important and crucial when we look at anything that is got to do with a human element. Not so much so when we are looking at transactional data, because that's going to bring in the information that you're using. But it would be really important to understand in your own organization what we as this organization determine a high risk AI use case would be. If it's anything to do with how we mapped and do utilizations to customers, that would be quite important. So what we do at an SAP perspective to help ensure responsible AI practices, it's really important to note that when you're developing these tools, you understand that where you apply it and which use cases you bring in will be relevant within specific processes. So that's how we bring it in from SAP. We bring it into the processes that runs businesses. And we've already done that work for you to ensure that where we help you in your finance space, we've done it ethically and responsibly because we've had this policy in place since 2018. And we also adhere to the UNESCO development goals for responsible AI. And that's really important because everyone in our organization is responsible and we all follow those rules. So, where the challenge sometimes comes in, more from an organizational perspective, is, and this is what I see working with organizations, there's this understanding that we have to build everything with AI from scratch. And we don't have to do that. We can look at the applications we have to start there to find these use cases. Because in my experience, when we have to come up with an AI use case, generally it's something that's actually quite complex. And you discuss that grid that I created. And the complexity takes you much longer and it will take you a really long time for you to start seeing business outcomes. And if you do something as simple as uploading and scanning information, uploading documents, let's say for your finance team that's busy typing all that information in and it removes the error, that's got a really high value for those employees, but the complexity is quite low. And that's how you can also start getting your business along. So it's my very long way of answering the responsible AI one. But I always go, when you're looking at bringing AI in, and this is the easiest way because there's no meaning to words responsible, ethical, um, transparency. It's not words you can really measure. And that makes it quite challenging for businesses, which can be quite daunting. But yes, in Australia, we've got policies that's coming in. We've got policies and guidelines available. Companies should also have policies in place. But when you look at doing AI or bringing AI into your business, start with the ones that's easy on your business data by understanding how it can really help your teams. Don't start with the complex ones by mapping how shoppers are going to shop and how I need to target them, and I don't know where to get the data. And my way of understanding what you shouldn't do is just always think, what is my ethical nightmare I'm trying to avoid? And what is that news article you don't want to ever see? Company X did 1, 2, 3 with AI. If you can just envision that, it's much easier to work back what you shouldn't do with AI And then you can also put guardrails in from checking your data, making sure you've got the right teams in place, and also creating and finding the right use cases, of course, on that matter.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like you said, it's we can say that we want ethical AI, obviously, and I would assume most people would, but then defining exactly what that entails is not obvious,
Mm.
and it's not, perhaps not, those definitions might not be shared, um, and then for me personally, I think just a really easy definition is that you should try to do things that are benefit and avoid doing things that are harmful. That would be a very simple definition of what's ethical in those implementations. But then at the same time, even as, for example, when you train the current models, you're doing that off of copyrighted works, for example, it by necessity, because otherwise there would be no data for these huge models. But doing that, you can argue that you're now hurting the copyright holders, but you're benefiting hell of a lot of people. So it's always that balance, and there will always be these
Yeah.
trade-offs. But I don't know. Have you, within SAP, have you like defined or put concretely put down what like ethical or responsible AI means within
Yes.
your context?
So we manage it from that. We ensure that it's safe, responsible. You always have an employee or human in the loop element, and we build
Mm.
transparency into every decision and that the applications make. It's quite easy to manage the output. You always have the final say. We also adhere to the highest levels of privacy standards when we bring those in.
Hmm.
But you mentioned the and how it's using data. So when we look at generative AI, you can't retrain the data, but you can fine tune it in a sense. So what makes the output better and so it has less error rates is by grounding it in your business data. So what I mean by that is we fine tuning the answer in the context of SAP so that it will, if you are asking it a question on a policy document about how many leave days I have, we're using a co-pilot on our one of our platforms. So it's across our platforms. It's called Joel, and you can ask sort of, I wanna understand this policy. Let's say I have a company vehicle and I use what is it for a personal trip. You want that generative AI copilot to display your policy documents. So that's what grounded is data. So it looks at the data you have on your policy documents to go find that answer, and that's really about how we develop it using retrieval augmented generation and also knowledge graphs. So it knows where to find the most relevant information. And that makes it less error prone, but there's always advice to just check the data and understand it to make sure it is correct. And that is in us human side, and we need to take some ownership of that as well.
Hey, I might go sideways. Something that came to mind, Kim. I made a statement before that maybe in Australia we're a little bit behind in terms of legislation, and I'm curious about your view because you have worked in South Africa, in the United Emirates, and yeah, curious to hear your view on how do you think we are tracking here in Australia in relation to other regions like Europe, UK as well.
Okay, I think from an Australian perspective, we're taking a pragmatic approach of how we bring AI legislation in and regulation. So I just want to add to that. So all the current legislation we have on data and technologies and privacy still applies to AI. It doesn't mean it's not part of it. And the way we're approaching it by putting out consultations and asking industry to provide responses is a really good way because we still need to adhere even without to the current legislation. But we want to ensure we've got something so we know how we want to use it and how we can use it. Because what's happening is sometimes on a business side, we they wait because they're not sure what's going to happen with regulation, but not everything is going to cause a regulation issue. So it's just also, again, it goes back to that education of AI and what it is and how we use it. Because if you start understanding that in your own business, that will really help you understand how you can map it back then to how you can map that back then to legislation and what's going to happen. The my It will be easy. It should be easy to understand. That's my recommendation. It should be easy to understand by all businesses. But if you are a responsible business, which most organizations are, you would already do the right thing when you're bringing these tools in.
Mhm.
So I think from my perspective, is bringing AI into an organization is all about your own organizational readiness. And for me, that should not be underestimated because AI is not straightforward because it's this tool that's really going to change how we work. It's coming into our processes, and we need to change how a certain project or workflow runs to get the most out of AI. So we can't just put it in these point solutions where I'm going to put it in this small area and then hope to get all the benefits. So it really requires an organizational redesign to understand where you apply it as well. So from your organizational readiness, how do you bring your own people on the journey? Because AI you will only get the most out of these tools when they're relevant for your employees to use and when they start using it, which is really important. And then what role also does HR leaders play in helping building the literacy? So it all starts with building literacy in our own teams and ourselves using the tools so we know what it's good for. And then we start looking at the data and the infrastructure that you need with it from your organizational readiness. If you can't access certain data, but you really want to do that use case, you've got a challenge because that's probably not a place to start. And then when we bring it in, we need to change how we work. So if I used to have a type of employee that was capturing information, so what else are they going to do? How does their role change, and how do we upskill them into a new role going forward?
I
Let's
remember doing the research for this conversation. I found an article that you wrote too. And by the way, we share all in the show notes for the listeners or your fantastic articles and podcast episodes with Best Run SAP, where you mentioned you had this, you're talking about the importance of having AI strategy versus just going with pilots that are not scalable, and you had this beautiful matrix of, what are the low hanging fruits in terms of high value, low complexity, which you kind of touched on earlier. So we'll share those in the notes for the listeners.
So, what I see is when we start looking at AI, it's quite daunting for organizations because every vendor, everyone is coming with their own AI tools, and they're trying to explain to them how they need to bring it in. And really, from an organization, they need to start taking a step back and understand actually from their perspective where AI will be suitable. And that's really how you can then figure out which vendors, which processes do I want to do, because it's quite an overwhelming landscape, and everyone has AI within their tools. But I would always go look what you have first rather than building something new, because there's quite a few instances where that happened. We built something that's already there.
Yeah. One thing I thought I would ask is, so even upfront, you talked about how AI can really automate repetitive tasks, and we can write code for coders, and so and one of the risks when we keep making things more effective, and we imagine that that will give us more time to do more meaningful things, but then we just cram more stuff in there, and we're still as busy as ever. But do you think that there's a chance that with AI really automating some of the boring, repetitive kind of tasks, that we can actually move on to doing things that are, or that require more of a human intervention, higher level things, and more meaningful things, and maybe even, be less busy and have less cluttered minds. What's your take? Do you think we're gonna just do what we always done and keep busy, or do you think AI is gonna actually help us do more quality, meaningful work?
My hope is that AI will help us do more higher value added tasks. So we can leave all the boring work that we don't like doing to AI, and that AI can really do all the work I don't like doing, such as ordering groceries every week. And the thing is there will be a point where those type of tasks will go away, and we could have support for that. And the other side is how we work will change, and I'm hoping that how we work will also become more efficient, and we would be doing high value added work, because that's really where I see the new employee 2.0 coming out, is higher value added work. But then the other question, which I don't have the answer for, is then what happens with the lower entry level type work, and what's going to happen with that in the future. And that would be something we'll need to think of, because there'll still need to be space for that going forward. But I was thinking, like, AI is a really useful tool, and I'll explain some really nice AI use cases where it's really being helpful, and then that will make us understand how it's coming in to augment rather than replace, because that's really where it will help. So I was talking to someone the other day. They were building, they used all these sensors in, they actually, what they did is they rented out a whole apartment, and they've set it up for, well, and the elderly would live in these apartments, and they had multiple elderly stay there. And they really started to had sensors on everything, and pots and pans and chairs, and they looked at how movement through an apartment would work. And then what they're doing with that data now is they're starting to understand, okay, if you have a certain disability or ailment, or there's something you're struggling to do with, how the home should be set up for elderly, which is a brilliant use case. But that's how we're using AI. So just think, in the next 5 years, when you have that data, the queries would know, how do we set this house up so it's suitable for that person. That's where it's coming in, and it's becoming really powerful. Even at SAP, we did in conjunction with one of our partners, we looked at Parkinson's disease, and we mapped how Parkinson's is helping, so the doctor could constantly see for his patients if they were on and off. And we used AI for that, so he could change their diagnosis or their treatment plans. So even at SAP, we've used AI to help with manage Parkinson's disease, and in conjunction with one of our partners, we worked with a doctor to help understand how that he can manage his patients better by bringing AI in, and he could have actual results if his patients were on and off, and if they have a good or bad day, and then based on that, that data actually he had available, he could change treatment plans, or just understand how his patients are doing, instead of that patient waiting for the next appointment. So that's really more hands-on of how it can help. And another one where it's creating opportunity is when we're bringing AI in for tutors for kids at school, because it's really offering that personalization for every single kid, to help learn, and also personalize how they learn through the use of these tools. So that's really very good use cases and benefits of how AI can be used for good in the society.
Beautiful. I'm delighted to hear all those use cases that SAP has been involved with, and I'm not surprised, right? Um, Lovely. Thanks, Kim. I was really pleased to hear you mention humans in the loop as well, because that's a concept that I came across when I was doing some research around for the Mindful AI Manifesto article that I wrote in 2020, I think. And Stuart Russell from Stanford University talks about humans in the loop in his book, Human Compatible. So I'm glad that SAP now is keeping that as a bit of a guideline. So as I think we probably need to start to wrap up soon, what would be, we spoke about AI literacy and education. What are the maybe one or two, a couple of tips that you would suggest for people to consume AI more mindfully and produce AI more mindfully? What comes to mind? What do you think we, ordinary people out there in the world could do?
Oh, well, I give a few recommendations for AI professionals and then non-professionals. So, if you are someone working with AI, I want you to use the tools that's available and actually understand how they are working and the data they are using, because that's really important when you're using it. Understand if there's anything within the platforms and in the software you own where you can use AI today on your business data. That would be a really good start instead of reinventing the wheel. And the most important one is talk to the business users, talk to the teams that you're working with, and understand what problems they're trying to solve and involve them when you are building this so they can validate it for you. And for normal as non-professionals, is we want you to use AI tools. If you're not using it every day, you're missing out and you are not learning what these tools can and can't do. Understand in your organization how AI is used. So then that will help you ask the right questions. And then if you need to use AI in your daily lives, because that will really help you become an AI literate, and that would really help you build a future where AI will be relevant for all of us.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kim.
That sounds really good. And yeah, as we wrap up, thank you for sticking with us through technical challenges, and for the listeners, I hope we can get rid of most of that in post, but some of it might still be there. But that's how things are sometimes. It's been really interesting hearing your perspective, and thank you so much for joining us and sharing your AI
Thank
wisdom.
you. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Natalie. I really enjoyed the
Thanks.
conversation.
Thanks for your time and energy, Kim. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.